I don't know who you are, but welcome to the Irish Photography Podcast. Sit back, relax, and listen about cameras, gear, settings, stories, and all things photography. Join Darren on Ireland's Best Photography Podcast. Let's go.
And you're very welcome to episode 130 of the Irish Photography Podcast. My name is Darren, I'm your host this evening, and I'm joined by somebody who I've wanted to have a chat with for a long period of time. So, without any further ado, McCloskey, welcome to the Irish Photography Podcast. How are you getting on, buddy?
I'm good, Darren. I'm good. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks very much for coming on. You know, I mean, like we've chatted a number of times in the gallery over the years, and I kind of said to myself, I want to get him on. I want to try and learn more about the fantastic work that you've done. I'm sure our audience as well would be excited to kind of hear your story. So I suppose to start off with really, Norm, if somebody doesn't know, who is Norman McCloskey?
That's a question I've been asking myself for a long time. But so I'm 49. I'm originally from Limerick City. I'm living here in Kerry for the best part of most of the last 30 years.
Okay.
I had a short sojourn in Dublin for college and work for a while, but managed to get back here as quick as I could. Married, dad to 2 kids. So I'm a landscape photographer based here in Kerry. I've been a photographer for nearly 30 years now.
Wow.
And primarily almost always landscape. I've worked in every area of photography that there is going. I run a gallery here. I publish my own books, which is, you know, the driving force behind what I do. Mm-hmm. And other than that, I'm a long-suffering Leeds United fan.
Oh, God help you.
And I mean, that pretty much kind of sums me up, I think.
It's a very, very good summary. It's a very good intro, you know, and a couple of questions actually which would come out of that is you mentioned here that you're in Kenmare for near on 30 years. So judging doing the math, you moved down there when you were around 19 or 20 and stuff like that. So what made you move to the Kingdom of Kerry? What was the draw? Yeah,
so I was 20 in Limerick at the time, so that would have been 1991. Mm-hmm. A lot of people forget that, you know, Ireland was just coming out of a recession back then, and I didn't get a ticket to the Dell Computers roadshow that was in Limerick. If you didn't get a job in Dell, that was it.
That was it, yeah.
So I mean, basically, we were on the dole doing nothing. Mm-hmm. So myself and a mate of mine went down to Kerry for a bit of R&R and a change of scenery. My sister was living here. She was a bit of a hippie, so she was having a great time down here. So we heard loads of good stories. So we came down and I just absolutely fell in love with the place. It was like going to a different planet, let alone a different county. Mm-hmm. It was such a change from my upbringing in the city. I mean, it was wonderful. And I just was turning 21 that summer, so I had a ball. Mm-hmm. And we were only supposed to stay for a couple of weeks. And my mate eventually went back. And the morning we were going to go back, I just decided, no, I'm not going. Wow. Because I had nothing to go back to, really. Mm-hmm. And I stayed and I got a job and, you know, everything else fell on from that. And it was the best thing I ever did, really. For sure, you know. Yeah. I knew back then, even at that young age, that I was doing the right thing. I mean, everyone thought I was mad. I mean, all the rest of my friends back in Limerick didn't even know where Kenmare was. And they just couldn't understand it.
You have to get a flight to go to Kenmare.
Yeah, I mean, they just couldn't understand it. I didn't really I hadn't heard of it. Mm-hmm. Much, you know, but so we ended up here, and never looked back. Really, it was wonderful.
Wow. And you know, you touched on something else as well there, is just in regards to the different genres of photography. So, like, you went down there with your head high in the clouds, let's just say, loving life, loving this different planet you were after finding. But were you into photography at that point, or did the photography come later?
It's a funny question, because my initial answer for years and years and years was no. I had no interest in photography.
Okay.
And photography found me in one of these really wonderful twists of fate, where I was helping a friend. The guy I ended up working for in a restaurant, was moving house. He asked me to help him. I wasn't too impressed because I was blindly hungover.
Okay.
We were a few of us were roped into doing this. I was carrying this big heavy box out, this big silver box, and I asked him what was in it, and he said, "Oh, I actually don't know. I hadn't seen that in years." I opened it up, and inside was this pristine Canon FTB 35mm.
Wow.
With a 50mm 1.2 lens. Of course, I didn't know what any of that meant,
yes.
But it was absolutely, never used. So he'd got it as a gift, and he had never used it.
Wow.
And I had never seen anything like this before in my life, up close anyway. And I don't know why, but I was completely transfixed by it. I just couldn't stop kind of looking at it and thinking about it. And eventually I plucked up enough courage to ask him, could I borrow it? And he said, what do you want it for? And I said, I don't know. I need to borrow this, and I need to figure it out. It's incredible. And he was Dutch, so the instruction booklet that came with it was in Dutch. It took me about a day to figure out how to actually even open it, to put a roll of film into it. There was no YouTube, no internet, nothing. So I had to figure this all out myself. And it was incredible. It was just, I put a roll of film into it, hopped on my bike, cycled out onto the Beara Peninsula and spent a day taking pictures in landscape. Wow. I had never done anything like this before. And it was incredible. It was a wonderful day. Everything else followed on from that. But years later, by the time I had finished college and I was already working in photography, and I was chatting to my mum one evening when I went back to Limerick. We were talking about how I ended up here or whatever. And she just very casually says, sure, you were always interested in photography. And I said, how do you mean? She said, sure, we couldn't take the camera out of your hand as a child. She says, half those pictures we have in the family album were taken by you. And I was like, this was just bizarre. And then she reminded me that for my 10th, when I was 10, the only prize I've ever won in my entire life was a camera. My father, who wasn't in my life, was an avid photographer. And then the only ever extracurricular thing that I ever signed up to do in secondary school was a class where we stayed behind in the evenings developing some pictures in a darkroom that our chemistry teacher. Now, none of this was a conscious thing in my head. So I wasn't the one to I wasn't the one to pick up a hobby and follow it and pursue it. I would try everything for about 5 minutes and be useless at it and move on. But photography seemed to be there. And then bizarrely, that camera that I won when I was 10, I brought it everywhere with me. So on all the school trips in 6th class and first year and everything, I took these pictures. Now, I found them about 10 years ago after my mum passed away. Couldn't believe it. It was wonderful. And I went to my 30th school reunion. I can't believe I'm actually saying that. My 30th school reunion. No, it couldn't be 30th. Was it the 20th? No, it is my 30th. Wow. Back in Limerick over Christmas last year. Okay. And I brought these photographs from when we were in first year. And we were a bunch of messers, and the stuff that was on it was, and the guys just couldn't believe it. It was incredible. Right. So photography was always knocking on the door, and maybe that's why when I saw this camera that it had such an impact, and maybe, as soon as I started taking pictures, it took hold finally. I mean, the rest follows on from there, but. It's funny, I said, oh yeah, no, my interest in photography started in 1992, but that was my default answer for so many years. Only recently I've realized it's always there.
Yeah, it probably took off from 1992, and there was a subconscious and an innate passion for it that you probably didn't have the association with until you picked up this and went, oh, hang on a second, and look where you are. I suppose, would that be something, and you think of it, that you went off out to Beara, as you said, and you had this camera, you had this passion, and then you had this scenery in front of you, which kind of was like a perfect storm of the ideal things to fall in love with even more. Is that a good synopsis?
Yeah, one of the reasons I stayed in Kenmare and didn't go back to Limerick was I just was absolutely, completely overwhelmed and just totally fell in love with the landscape. I mean, I was having a great time otherwise, there was lots of parties and it was great fun.
As you do, yeah.
But I was genuinely, just blown away by the beauty of this place, and being able to live in a town in such proximity to it was incredible as well. It was actually kind of overwhelming. I was like going, Jesus, 20 years, what have I been doing? And, like the closest thing I got to it as a kid was watching Grizzly Adams, thinking like, imagine what it's like to live out there. And all of a sudden now I was living in this lovely little house, staring out at this landscape all the time. So actually, when I picked up a camera and started looking through the lens and started taking, it was a way of actually interpreting that. And it was a way of actually having a conversation and expressing myself for it, because I'd bore the hell out of everyone in the pub telling them about what valley I went into one day, or what great place I found. I mean, even the locals, they were sick of hearing about it. And I used to just go on and on and on about this, like. But actually then with photography, it was just it was a much simpler way of doing it. And it was a way that I could just really express this in a creative way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I never dreamed that when I started that it would come to anything.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it was great. And, the inspiration was right there from the right, I was in the best place for it. It was all around me. And by chance, Beara was the first place I went out and took pictures.
Tell me this, you kind of alluded to as well in your intro, but it's landscape photography primarily right now that I know you for. But have you dabbled in other areas of photography over the years? So I imagine when you had your camera, a young buck around Kenmare with this camera, you were taking pictures of everybody, everywhere, everything, every place. Were you doing street photography even though you didn't know you were doing street photography? Were you doing abstract photography even though you didn't know you were doing abstract photography? Or was it purely the landscape that you said, you know what, yeah, I'm only going to do this? Or did you try everything?
I didn't try everything out of interest. I mean, I studied photography in college.
Okay.
So I went to art college I think it's called IADT now. That was fantastic. That was wonderful. And it was a million miles away from landscape photography. So it forced you to do lots of other things, such as street photography, reportage, some portraiture, studio photography, and so on. So I did all of that during college. I didn't really have any interest in other area of photography. I mean, when I started off, I self-taught myself. And the only resource that I could find, there wasn't even a book in the library. There wasn't even one single photography book in Kenmare Library. And I had to just annoy and beg and plead one of the shopkeepers here to stock a practical photography magazine for me. And when you got that back in the 90s, it was really camera club amateur-y stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So like, apples dropping into bowls of milk and all of that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Or else it was like 16 pages of features on how to photograph a chaffinch or something.
Mm-hmm.
I had no interest in it. And, the only bits that I was interested were the landscape bits.
Okay.
I had no interest in how to light a model or anything like that. But I did bring my camera with me everywhere, and all of my friends got really used to it. Dangerously, I brought it out on nights out.
Before the internet and Facebook was there, Norm was there with his camera, yeah.
Yeah, and it's wonderful because I have some great, I've captured some
Candid
great memories,
moments,
and I'm a very nostalgic person, so it's wonderful to have that. But I didn't really have any interest in that. It was landscape all the time. And when I went to art college, it was a real shock because I only realized, even though I got in with a portfolio made up of primarily landscape photographs, landscape photography was totally frowned upon. It was amateur hour. It wasn't serious photography at all. Mm-hmm. And I had a real struggle and a real battle with a couple of my lecturers. There's a lot of politics that goes on in college, especially art college, because it's quite a subjective thing. There's no strict criteria for marking someone's photography work. And I had a battle. I was determined to somehow get landscape into every one of my projects and assignments.
Okay.
So I did a lot of conceptual landscape work and everything. And I even brought landscapes into the studio. I did lots of pretty crazy stuff, but it was really great. But it was always, and I was just determined not to kind of turn my back on it. But I left college, as most of us did, and the harsh reality of the world hits you very quickly.
Yes.
There's very few jobs out there. So straight away I was into commercial photography, and I was assisting, and that's the route I thought I was going to take. Mm-hmm. And I spent a year doing that. And while it was pretty cool, we did some really good jobs and we did some interesting stuff, I immediately knew I didn't want to be a commercial photographer.
Okay.
And then I ended up working in a sports photography agency for 18 years. And I definitely didn't want to be a sports photographer.
Okay. Yeah.
Even though I did do some photography for the agency, I was very selective about what I did, but it was always landscape.
Your passion was the
landscape. That was the only thing that actually would get me out of bed at 4 a.m. willingly, 5 days in a row. That was the only thing that never felt like work. It was one thing that I had a passion. It's how I identified myself as a photographer. And in fact, for years, my girlfriend at the time would introduce me to her friends as a photographer, and I'd kind of I'm not really a photographer because I wasn't doing landscape photography work. I mean, I was doing lots of other little jobs, paid jobs and so on. And I was working in photography and I was making all my money from photography. Mm-hmm. But because I wasn't a landscape photographer, I just didn't identify as one for a long time.
It wasn't the passion.
No, and I ended up doing lots of commercial work and lots of portraiture and lots of weddings for 3-4 years after, in recent times. but it was always landscape. So I was very easy. It was very easy for me to walk away from all of that about 3 years ago and just decide it's just going to be landscape and that's it.
And you know, it's interesting you say it about landscape, because from my point of view, I'm a landscape photographer, and I'm only a landscape photographer. I don't do anything else. I think I have my friends and go, oh, sure, there's this kid's party. Darren has a camera. He'll take the... No, I only know how to take photos of landscape because the landscape stays still. People don't. And that's something that in my own mind, I don't enjoy taking those other photographs. So if the passion is there, and you know, there's the old phrase, you find the job you love, you never have to work another day in your life because it's something that you enjoy. The motivation is there. It gets you out of the bed in the morning, it gets you home in the evening late and such like that. But from the landscape, from my point of view, and even looking at your images, it's clear that the passion is there for the landscape because you will put yourself in those conditions. You will be chasing those lights. You are in search of that unique image in something which somebody else might look past. And that's where I think for me, the hook comes into it, because you can go out with a camera and you can take a picture of a subject, but you can go out with a camera to take a picture of the landscape, and it tells a much, much broader story. But you can add your own twist to it as well then by the time that you're there, where you compose the photograph, the story you tell within the image. And for the person that's looking at that image, it actually can be more immersive than any other static image that you might see out there of a sports or a person or a product or whatever it may be. So I think it's interesting you say that your passion was only for landscape ultimately, and everything else was kind of by the by. But at the end of the day, if it wasn't landscape, you weren't happy, because you've now, and you mentioned it again earlier on, you know, you've got a fantastic gallery that's down in Kenmare, and it's a landscape photography gallery. And you can see, well, I can see because I've visited a number of occasions, that you can see part of you within that entire gallery of images that are there, because the landscape is so addictive, because you can go out into exactly the same scene every single day, but you're going to get a different shot every single day. So what made you then think, you know what, yeah, I'm good at this landscape photography business, I enjoy this landscape photography business? What made you think about setting up the gallery in Kenmare? Was it because everybody in Kenmare knew that you were the guy with the camera and it was a natural progression? Or was it something that, you know what, no, I'm going to show people that I can do this, and I'm going to show them how good it can be with the landscape?
No, it was actually it was the dream from day one.
Okay.
It was always there. I mean, and very specifically, and I've told this story before and kind of talks on that, but I think it must have been I'd say 93 or 94, and I went to Kinsale for a weekend with my girlfriend at the time, and I walked in the doors of Giles Norman's gallery in Kinsale, which is a lot different than it is now. I was amazed to find a landscape photography gallery in Ireland. I hadn't heard of him, because how would you? You know, there was no,
For sure.
you know, apart from maybe seeing postcards in those days, that would be it. I walked in the door, I just, you know, and I sometimes wonder, do I remember this differently? But I seem to remember like the classic gallery setup of like pot of coffee brewing for people who were browsing. There was music playing, he was behind the counter. And as I was looking around, I bored my girlfriend. I didn't want to leave the place. You know, I was in there for ages and ages and ages. And then someone came in and was chatting to him, and, you know, bought a piece, and he wrapped it up and off they went. And I just thought, that's amazing. I'd always lacked focus in my life. I hadn't a clue what I wanted to do. My girlfriend at the time, she wanted to be a writer, and that's what we knew, and that was it. What I was going to do was anybody's guess. So it was definitely before I went to college, I'm sure. But I walked out of that gallery, and I says, that's it. That's what I want to do. And very specifically, I wanted to do it in Kenmare. I had that dream, and when I say dream, I really mean like this is the kind of stuff that A, I used to actually dream about, and B, I used to stay awake at night thinking about. For about 20 years, and I had some opportunities, and when my work began to develop, and when I began to meet other photographers, and I went to see, you know, a couple of quite prestigious photographers at the time in Ireland who weren't necessarily landscape photographers but were very good photographers, and I would go and see them, and I'd bring my portfolio, and they were, you know, massively encouraging, and they'd be saying, look, this is gallery stuff, this is good. I kind of cringe now because it wasn't that great, but they saw something in it. And they said, you know, you should be doing this, and what would you like to do? And I'd say, oh, I'd love to have a gallery. And they said, well, do it. But I never really backed myself. You know, I just didn't have the confidence, and I just wasn't that type of person. I was quite reluctant. And I ended up from college, then from a year working as an assistant, to getting a job with the sports photography agency.
Mm-hmm.
That surrounded me with a massive comfort blanket, and it was too comfortable because I ended up having a really, really good job.
Mm-hmm.
And it was hugely enjoyable, and I had massive benefits from it.
Okay.
You know, I got to travel, I got to buy loads of gear through the company. I was really well paid, and then the biggest bonus of all was I got to actually up sticks and move to Kerry and work from home for 14 years, which, you know, everyone's doing it now, but I was doing it 14 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And it was wonderful. So, you know, even during that time, I had opportunities, but I just thought, now's not the time. My work was in other people's galleries, and I was selling little bits and so on. You know, there were times when I thought my chance is gone. You know, I've seen people come to Kenmare and do basically live my dream,
What you
open
wanted,
up galleries.
Yes.
And, you know, sometimes it felt like a bit of a kick in the teeth. Sometimes I felt, oh, look, this is just how it's supposed to be. I've actually always trusted kind of fate. I've always just realized there's a path, and I'm not going to force it. But eventually it did. It came my way. And bizarrely, it's a long story, but I won't tell it. But basically the gallery came to me. I wasn't looking for the space at all. And it was a place that had been completely overlooked in Kenmare. And when it came to me via a friend of my wife's, I didn't really think. You know, she came in and said, "This place is free. You know, what do you think?" And I said, "Well, find out what the rent is," because I thought it'd be astronomical. When she came back and told me what the rent was, I very quickly did some sums and realized, actually, you know, I'm selling enough online as it is to cover that and more. So, but even with that, I wasn't sure. We were going away for the weekend with the kids. We were going down to West Cork.
Okay.
And we were chatting the whole way down the car in it. And she was trying to be encouraging, but she had never really pushed me into something I didn't know I was ready for. We stopped for lunch in Rosscarbery. Okay. She was up at the Carvery. I was with the kids. The kids were quite small at the time. Next minute, this voice we were chatting about nothing else the whole way down. Will I, won't I, will I, won't I? And I'm so indecisive. This voice beside me says, "Sorry, is this seat free?" And I looked up, and it was Giles Norman. And he was sitting down beside me having lunch, and I had never spoken to him since that day.
Wow.
And I didn't talk to him that day. I just said, "Yes, it is." And then I was looking at my wife sat down and got the food, and I was just looking at her, and she says, what is wrong with you?" And I was kind of saying, you know, I couldn't obviously say a word, but I just, you know, we walked out of that place, and I said, "Well, look, if ever there's a sign, you know, that's got to be a sign." Yeah.
Yes.
And I just said, "I'm doing it, you know, let's do it."
Wow.
And yeah, it was great, and I haven't looked back since, you know. Now, I mean, I was very fortunate in that the company that I was working with at the time, you know, I agreed to go down to a 3-day week.
Okay.
And I kind of convinced my boss that I would still, all my time would still go into, you know, but it was never going to be the case, really. So after a couple of months, you know, the cracks began to show, and he knew and I knew that the parting was coming, and there was a bit of pressure on it already, because I'd been, you know, 14 years out of the office. It you know, and the dynamic in the company was changing. Sure. So, yes. You know, I think it was great timing in that probably going to have to move on anyway. We kept that up for a couple of months, and eventually I said, "Look, you know, that's it. I got to do this full time."
Let's call it a day. Yeah.
And you know, I didn't exactly jump out of a plane without a parachute or anything. I had already kind of been setting up a very small fledgling kind of commercial business. So I was doing a lot of interiors. I was doing a lot of kind of B&Bs. I was, you know, doing a little bit of PR. I was doing some house shots for, you know, the Sunday Times and the Sunday Tribune and stuff. So I had a fledgling kind of commercial business there. And then I got approached to actually be a wedding photographer, of all things. And it was for a local venue. The guy that had approached me, he's quite a famous hotelier in Ireland. He said, you know, he gave me this big long pitch about how he wanted it, and it was kind of embarrassing because I was trying to work up, where is the point that I'm going to tell him that I'm not a wedding photographer? And eventually I actually, you know, he was talking for about 15 minutes, and he's incredibly persuasive and enthusiastic.
Yes.
And eventually I just said, "Well, look, John, I'm not a wedding photographer." And he said, "Sure, I know that." And he says, "That's why I want you." I was even more confused. And I said, okay, fine, put me on the list. And within 2 or 3 weeks, I had like 4 bookings.
Wow.
And I had absolutely no clue how I was going to do them. It was bizarre. It was scary. I mean, my very first wedding, I turned up outside the bride's house and I nearly threw up with nerves.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, and a bit like everything else I did in my previous career in the sports photography agency and everything else, and as an assistant and as a freelancer, you just go in and be professional. So I just was in and professional. And I worked in the hospitality industry for 10 years as well.
Okay.
So that actually, I applied a lot of those things to it. And amazingly, I turned into this guy that I never knew existed. I did, 85 weddings over the next 3 years.
Wow.
Which isn't a lot now for a wedding photographer, but it was a lot for me.
But you're not a wedding photographer. It's a lot for a landscape photographer to do that many weddings.
Yeah. And
Wow.
I was committed to it, and it was great. I had a great time, but the workload was ridiculous, and it did stress me out a bit. And I used to get very stressed before each wedding, and I realized, look, this isn't what I want to do. I knew in my heart and soul this is not what I want to be doing. But yet when I got there, I was this incredible person that everyone loved. And I mean, I have a shelf of letters and postcards and emails and everything from people who just,
Blown away
couldn't
by
thank
what
me
you could
enough.
do. Yeah.
I didn't think my images were any, they weren't going to win any awards. But I suppose in the same way as what I looked for in the landscape, I looked for, just real emotion and real kind of just authenticity. And that seemed to work. And but as I said, 3 years ago, I knocked it on the head, and it's just full time in the gallery now, which is great.
And you know what? I mean, the gallery, for anybody who's listening to the podcast that has visited the gallery, they know how beautiful you've actually put a gallery together. It is really, really nice. And, for anybody that hasn't, when we can all move around the place again, I'd recommend, to go to Kenmare and look at the gallery, because it is a fantastic body of work. But not only that, the way you've got it laid out, I think is very, very good as well. And I suppose with that in mind, we're dealing with different times right now. So your gallery is in Kenmare, and obviously during the summertime we get typically a lot of tourists that will come to Kenmare. But now in the last year we haven't had that, and we're in the COVID situation. Has that made things more different? Have you had to diversify now to be able to still keep the business going, but without the footfall, let's just say, of the tourists coming into Kenmare? How different is it now to in the past with the gallery?
Well, at the moment it's very different because we're closed.
Yeah.
And I was closed for half of last year. We had literally, I'd spent February working in the gallery, so we'd spent February painting it and getting everything shipshape, and I had framed up a load of new stock. I had a load of great plans, and then that was it. We were shut. Now, everyone's COVID experience has been very different. I mean, I remember being out in shoots, and I would kind of listen to the radio as I'm driving around in February, listening to the reports of this kind of growing situation, and being genuinely really concerned, and being amazed at how unconcerned the rest of everyone was, and how when it kind of hit, we were terrified, because I have a 14-year-old daughter who's type 1 diabetic.
Okay.
And at the time, all you heard was people who are overweight, people who have asthma, and diabetics. So we were genuinely really scared. So lockdown actually came as a huge relief. Everything was put in perspective. I didn't give a monkey's about the business. I really didn't. I had said to my wife, I just turned around and says, look, let's just write the year off. Let's just pretend it just didn't. Let's get through it with what we can. And fortunately, I had savings to see us through the year, I think. And, we actually isolated about a week or 10 days before lockdown came in. We had made that decision ourselves. So lockdown was a huge relief for us. And then, something amazing happened. The sun started shining. We discovered our local area. We were all having breakfast, lunch and dinner together, the 4 of us sitting around the table. Myself and my wife were out painting the fence and gardening and everything. I mean, lots of people have similar stories. And I had the first proper break that I had in about 12 years.
Wow.
It was the first time I took any real serious downtime. It was lovely. So we tried to look on the bright side of it as much as we could. Business at the start, I had a flurry of activity online, and I thought, this is great. This is what everyone's going to do. And even from the States and stuff, But then the more serious the situation got, that pretty much dried up.
Okay.
And then as soon as I tried to do something, you just run into logistical problems everywhere. My framer suppliers wasn't functioning properly. All the postal system all around the world stopped, so you couldn't ship anything. So I had to try a lot of different things. It started to work. I had enough coming in that kept me ticking over, that basically covered the costs of keeping the gallery going and everything. And we didn't open up the gallery properly until July, because there was no point. I mean, I think we could open up mid-June, but there was no one around.
Sure.
So as soon as people started traveling, and we ended up having the busiest July and August we've ever had. And a lot of businesses are the same. And a couple of people I know who have galleries all had the same experience. So what happened was the Irish just came out in droves.
Absolutely.
Because they had been locked up for 4 months and they weren't spending $5,000 flying to the Canaries.
Exactly.
They all had a lot of money. So all of a sudden my customer base had changed rapidly to people who would never consider buying any art, who were sitting at home in their living room. They were being nagged into, doing up their living room and changing the wallpaper and doing everything. So this all started to happen. It was great. We had a pretty good summer, I have to say. And it was very different in that normally I would probably export about half my sales between May and September would go to the States. And there's a lot of work in that because you have to ship and box and trace and track.
Yes.
And there's emails back and forth all the time and everything. But now people were just coming in, taking the stuff off the walls, putting it in their car and driving away.
Wow.
So I have to say we had a really good summer. We were geared up for like continuing that on, but then of course the second lockdown happened, and then we lost October, and that was a big hit for us. But then Christmas happened, and we had a really busy November and December.
Fantastic.
And we were ready for it. Normally in November I would do a major commercial art show in Dublin, which takes me about 2 weeks to prepare for, and then it's a week up there, so it's a big commitment. That's nearly all of November. So we didn't have that this year. But instead we were in the workshop every day, framing, printing, boxing, shipping out. It was great. Everyone's story is different, but I feel very fortunate. It was wonderful as well, because there was a different kind of feel to what you were doing. I mean, people were at home and they were getting this a lot of the emails all were the same. Was like, we can't make it to Kerry this year. We've been longing for something. So we're going to buy, this picture off you or whatever. And then you'd get an email when they get it, equally as nice. So there was a slightly different feel to it, and you kind of felt. I was very, very humbled and blown away by how many people supported my work during this time. It was incredible, and not just me, but artists in general. I mean, I know from suppliers how busy they've all been and how busy other artists have been, and people just, there was the whole kind of buy local, buy Irish aspect to it as well. We made it work. Now, normally this time of the year I'd probably be closed anyway, and a little bit of that residual kind of good feeling is still tipping away. I just was very lucky. Now, I feel for guys, I have friends who are very reliant on workshop businesses and so on. For sure. And that was decimated. I have friends who are wedding photographers. I just thank my lucky stars I got out of that game,
And even sports photography is gone as well, because
yeah, exactly. I was in a very
fortunate position.
Good place. Yeah.
And something else that got me thinking of there, is that, like, as I said from the beginning, I've called into you a few times in the gallery, and we've chatted a couple of times. And one of the things you'd say to me is that you can find it very hard to try and get out and get new work, because you're in the gallery every single day, so you might get out in the morning, but you have to rush back to get to the gallery because you wanted the gallery open, unless you've got somebody else in there that can open it for you, or even in the evening time, particularly in the winter's time, or not even winter, but the autumn time, and you get the nice colours and such like that. So did you get any opportunity now during the whole autumn of last year to go out and create new pieces? And have you found the release away from the gallery kind of a release, a freedom to be able to say, okay, you know what, I can now go out and get these shots that I've wanted to get in the past? Okay, granted, you can't go as far as you wanted to go, but when we were able to stay within our local area, is that something that you found has been a new development too?
Yeah, during the lockdown, I explored I pretty much stuck to the rules.
Yes.
I stayed within 5 or 6, 7K of the house here. I didn't do anything silly. I didn't do any long journeys or anything like that. And not for any kind of civic duty really. It's just, you know, where I go and where I work and how I work. If you're driving down a country lane and there's some farmer that lives down there who could be terrified right now of seeing any strange car.
For sure.
I didn't think, no, this isn't something I should be doing. But a bit like everyone, I decided, I just started looking around me. And where I live, I'm about 3 minutes walk to the beach. I've got a forest one side of me and I've got mountains behind me. It's a pretty good spot to go and explore. And I found places. I couldn't believe how I hadn't been up there in some of these places. I just was kicking myself. 20-something years living here, and this was on my doorstep. But I found it was very, very important for me to do it, to get out there, to get that headspace, to not only to keep in touch with what I was doing and to create work, but really for just to balance everything and to escape the news and to just, I mean, I'm very fortunate. I've never had any issues with my mental health, and I think the reason being has been that I've had this balance, this incredible, wonderful power of nature that I allow into my life and is a huge part of my life constantly. Yeah, I felt. I mean, there were times when things were kind of tough. A bit like everyone, we probably all know someone who's either a COVID denier or someone who's done something really silly, and you can get caught up at looking at stuff online, and that was no stranger to us here, and suddenly I started to feel it really, getting quite anxious about it at times. It was very hard to escape it, but once I pick up the camera bag, get in the car, and you're out in the hills, everything dissipates, and it was a wonderful release just to change the scenery to do that. I actually did work quite a bit, and then I did a nice little thing. Kenmare was bizarre here. We had this glorious weather, but there wasn't a car in the streets. The town was completely deserted. And one morning when I was coming back in from a very early shoot, I passed through the town, and it was just gorgeous. So I started photographing the town. So then I ended up starting doing a little series on the town, pictures that I wanted to take for years, but you couldn't because the streets were always choked with traffic and buses and everything overnight. And I had a great time doing that. And I only did it for myself. And I posted them online on my Instagram. And the messages I got from people, it was incredible. People have stopped me on the street and said, that series of pictures kept me going every day. I mean, I'm not saying that I saved anyone or anything.
Yeah, for sure, yeah.
The way people can relate to some imagery, they were uplifting, they were nice, it was sunny, but it was in the most dreadful of times. That was quite a lovely little thing to do. Then they started selling, which was bizarre, so people started buying them. When nothing else was coming in, all of a sudden I had these. Now they were only open editions, and they were small little open editions, which was even nicer, to be honest with you, because people bought them, and locals came into my gallery afterwards and bought them, who had never been in there, who would never have considered of buying, spending 400, 500, 600 euros on a piece, but they were delighted to buy these little small series of prints, and that was really nice. So quite a different experience. I did get out quite a bit. I mean, I was really disappointed with this lockdown, but I knew it was coming because I had so many things planned. It's not going to happen. I missed last winter through just a few different things. I was working, I had other commitments, and I had another job on, and I thought, no, this winter,
this year, I get it.
No, I got out quite a bit before Christmas. I was working quite hard, but January, February, I kind of love this time of the year anyway.
Me too.
But I won't be going anywhere, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
At least nowhere too far.
Yeah. Not for now anyway, but sure, you know what? The next seasons are about to arrive. And I suppose, what we'll do there, Norm, is we'll take a very quick break, right? And we'll be right back, and I want to discuss a bit more about the type of prints that you choose to go into the gallery. So we'll be right back after this. If you're enjoying this episode of the podcast, why not jump over to iTunes or Spotify and listen to the back catalogue that we have of some great episodes where we talk about photography, gear, and some excellent guests along the way. Thanks very much for listening and for watching. We'll see you on the next one. And you're very welcome back to the Irish Photography Podcast. So Norm, as I alluded to there before the break, you've got some fantastic prints that are in your gallery. And, I've seen them in various different sizes, different mounts, etc., etc. Like, do you make these yourself, or do you have somebody that makes them for you, first and foremost?
I would do them myself. I've always printed my own work, right from the very first early days of college, from darkrooms, and then everywhere I lived after that for the next 15, 16 years.
Okay.
I had to have a darkroom. I wasn't the greatest of darkroom technicians. I wasn't a great printer. If I needed a really good print, I would send it out to someone else to get a good print out of it. But I loved it, and it's something that actually always surprises me. A few photographers actually will invest in a printer and print their work today. I just think it's an absolute just integral part of it, that you don't really see it or feel it or experience it until you're holding it in your hand as a print. I've done it from very early days, and when I switched to digital in 2011, I was able to print quite easily with the inkjet printers that were around, but they've evolved incredibly. I have a large format printer now, and they're just incredible machines. From a business point of view and from a commercial point of view, it just makes sense to be printing your own work. I'd love for someone to print my work all the time, but it just makes sense, and I just like the idea of actually printing. I wouldn't really be just incredibly particular about printing as such. I believe I have something that works. I think it works quite well. I use kind of good papers, good ink, so I trust the process. And then I put them all together in the frames myself. And the frames, I don't cut my frames myself. I get the frames ready assembled, already cut for me into frames, and I use a mounting system. So I'd mount that all together, and then I get my glass from a different supplier. I use quite nice non-reflective glass, and all of that is fairly hands-on. It's fairly physical, it's time consuming. We have looked at it over the years because it's one of the biggest things that you come up against. As a photographer who's running a gallery, you find yourself asking yourself, am I a framer or am I a photographer? Because I'm spending most of my time framing. And we've tried it. We've tried outsourcing some of the framing to people. But I have to say, I am quite exact, and I'm very precise in the finished product. They're reasonably priced, I think, but at the same time, it could be a lot of money to some people. So I'm not going to put out anything that is not 100% right, that has little bits of dust in it. So we have to do that ourselves. It's a bit of a trap. You get stuck in it, and maybe someday down the line, I will have someone employed that will be able to do that and free me up a little bit. But there's a certain element of satisfaction in doing a print and following it right through to a framed piece and hanging it on the wall. It's even nicer when someone comes and takes them away.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, that's the most important part, really, at the end of the day, to seeing the happy look in their face. But how do you decide what images go into the gallery then? I
was very aware of, and because I thought about it, having a gallery for so long, I used to read about it. I used to obsess about it. And I used to read about everyone else living my life. So every interview, anything about anyone who had a gallery, I used to, just devour it. So I knew a lot of the pitfalls. And, there was the obvious one of, once you have a gallery, it is essentially a business unless you want it to fail. And then, you can fall into the trap of suddenly going out to photograph what you think will sell. And so many people have fallen into that trap. I didn't want to. I was very lucky in that, because I was such a procrastinator and I put it off for so long, I had developed quite a decent collection, and my photography had matured and evolved from 5 or 6 years earlier when I published my first book. So I was very happy with what I was putting on the walls, opening the doors. There was maybe 1 or 2 images in there that I'd kind of, and there's definitely a few that have come and gone that I've taken out of the collection that haven't gone back in, and there's a couple that have sold out. And there's 1 image, I'd say, in the entire collection, and that's a picture of Rosscastle. And it's a nice picture of Rosscastle. It's not a picture of the castle, it's a castle in the landscape. And as far as pictures of Rosscastle goes, I think it's a pretty good one, and it suits my style. But that's probably the only one that I know that, for example, I took it out of the gallery this summer because I just knew it isn't of any interest. But yet, when my American lovely customers come in, they just see that and they just go, oh my God, you know,
love it.
because they're suckers for a castle.
Yes.
You know, sometimes you will have pieces that, you know, that are there, that are in your collection. You'll move them around and you'll position them. But as for deciding what I'm going to put in terms of new work, it generally has to, you know, first of all, it has to excite me and really interest me. It has to actually then tie into where I am as a photographer now and where I want to go. And I have to be very honest with myself and very, very hard on myself.
For sure.
I am pretty much my own toughest.
Your worst critic, yeah.
Yeah, I really am. There are times that works quite well. There are times when the more bolder I've gotten and I've decided that something which I would regard as kind of really personal and kind of a bit out there, the more I put that work in, that actually gets a great response. And the more I'm kind of encouraged to do that, the less and less stuff. I mean, I took an image quite recently of a place nearby, and it was this spectacular sunrise. Now, I've moved on from sunrises 10 years ago, but this was just mind-boggling. You just wouldn't believe it was true. And I thought it was quite nice. But anyway, I ended up printing it, and I just did a test print. And my wife walked in and she said, oh my God, that's incredible. You have to put that in the gallery. And she just nagged and nagged and nagged. She said, you have to put it in. I did a print, and it was a nice print. And just after the second lockdown, and I was sitting in the gallery, and it was as if there was someone in the room that was just annoying you. This picture was just annoying me. And it just bothered me until eventually I said, right, that's it, that's going. And there was no other reason, only for my own personal preference. And I don't want to come across as being a bit snobby or anything, but it didn't fit in with what I wanted. Now, at the same time, you can't go completely full tilt your own personal stuff. So you have to strike a balance, but I don't go out and shoot for the gallery. I don't go out and shoot for sales. I'm very lucky in that since I've opened the gallery, really, I've been working on kind of book projects. And that really, that just sets me on a course. I end up making the images that I really want to make myself. And every now and again, I'm lucky. Now, I do get commissions. So I get commissions from people, and I have a notebook of a long list of places that people want. I'm not going to say no to them. But the condition is that I'll do it on my own time. So a commission could take 2 weeks, or it could take 3 years.
Yeah.
So there's no time constraint. Every now and again, I have a photographed place that I wouldn't normally get on to do. And I've thought, yeah, okay, so that's ended up in the gallery a bit. I think you have to be honest and realise, it has to reflect me. It has to be a bit personal. It has to just tie in with the rest of the body of work. And so far, that just seems to be a kind of a natural process. I don't really have to think too hard about it. I know more about what not to put in the gallery than I do about what I am going to put in the gallery and what people will like. And I've done a few experiments. It's amazing. About a year and a half ago, I put a picture up onto Instagram, which I wouldn't normally put up. And it's an image I took for Bera, which I didn't put in the book.
Okay.
It is, I think, Head and Shoulders probably the most popular image that I've ever put up on Instagram.
Wow.
It went, now I'm not, I've only 3,000 or something followers or something. But it was the most liked, most engaged, most whatever image that I've had. And I didn't really rate it. And I said, I'm going to do a print of this. So I printed one up. It's framed. It's really lovely presented. And I put it in the gallery. And it's still there.
Wow.
I haven't sold a single one of them. And I know I won't. And I'll end up giving it away to someone. And there's nothing wrong with it. And people come in and they oh, isn't that beautiful, isn't this one? But they end up buying something else. So it's funny. There's no rhyme or reason to it, really. There's no set kind of pattern of what you do. But I suppose, as I said, I kind of know more about what not to put in than
interesting.
What I do put in, yeah.
Very interesting. You mentioned there actually about books, and you mentioned about Bera, and Bera, I think that's your most recent release. And I mean, Bera is a stunning location, and it's one that seems to be passed by many people. I mean, I know myself, I've gone to Bera a few times, but I've never even touched the surface of Bera. And it's an area that I think is unexplored. So what made you come up with the idea, is, as you said earlier on, when you first gave an example of getting your camera, the first place you went to was out onto Bera. Bera, I think, has something innately built into you, I think, but maybe I'm wrong on that. But what is it about Beara? Why did you decide to do a book about Beara? And do you agree that it is an area that is overlooked by many?
It certainly was. It's kind of it's really. I think it's on the map now. The secret's out, and you're right in terms of my connection with it. I mean, I would my heart and soul is really out there. You know, it's just a place that I find I just feel at home there. I absolutely everything that I love and everything that I fell in love with about landscape photography and every image, and I remember things. I remember shafts of light. I remember early mornings. I have a visual memory rather than kind of dates and names or anything. And they're all out there. You know, that's nearly 30 years of it. After I finished my first book in Parklight, you have this kind of instant craving, well, at least I do, to go on to the next project. I had a couple of ideas and I had kind of tentatively started a very different book and it wasn't grabbing me. But, you know, one day I found myself out in Beara just on a shoot and I realized, you know, what am I thinking of? This is where I should be. You know, this is where it speaks to me. I find it an incredible place and a landscape to work in. But I can understand how on the surface it would be kind of confusing and challenging for other photographers. Especially, you know, guys that come down for a day or a week or a weekend, I mean. Because on the surface there aren't that many instant spots you can go and get
Instant
shot,
bangers.
you know, there's a couple of places. But for me, I had been immersed in this landscape for 20 more years. So the pictures that I wanted to make were very different than what a lot of other people would have been gone looking for. And I used to, it was one of the things I used to just marvel at when I looked through photography books of photographers I loved and the early days, kind of thinking, how did they think to take that picture? When I knew that, you know, so many people would have walked by it, and obviously at that time that's what spoke to them. And so I came at Beara at a very different kind of approach than I did with my first book, Parklight, where I was trying to record a place and, you know, make a kind of a statement. Whereas with Beara, I was going to indulge myself, and it was going to be an absolute personal expression of my experience in this landscape. That was incredible. I knew I was kind of taking a risk, but in hindsight now, it was the best thing I've done, because I think it speaks to the viewer in a way that, you know, more so than any kind of a guidebook or any kind of a touristy kind of photography book would. It's not a collection of pictures of a place. It's a collection of pictures that sum up an idea or an experience or a feeling or an attachment to a landscape. And amazingly, a lot of people have an incredible attachment to Beara. It's hard to quantify. I mean, I know from my years being here and knowing people who live there, you know, I've known kind of Germans to accidentally take a wrong turn, head out onto the Beara thinking they were going to Killarney, and then they never left for 40 years. And it's that kind of place, and it's wonderful. And you would meet all sorts of people who live there, you know, artists and artisan food makers and, you know, Dutch people and German people and people who are just completely, you know, getting away from life. Yeah. I mean, Neil Jordan, the film director who wrote the foreword to the book, you know, he has a house there, and, you know, that's why I approached him, because I thought, well, he gets it, you know, he gets this place. There's been all manner of people over the years. You know, no one could quite put their finger on it, because on paper it has nothing. You know, it has very little. There's no beaches. You know, there aren't any great restaurants. Castletownbere, only in recent years has it come on a little bit, but before that it was an eyesore. You know, there's a lot of reasons why this place shouldn't be that special, but yet it is to so many people. It was perfect for me to do a book on it. Again, I was very lucky, along with Parklight, which was on Killarney National Park.
Yes.
I was the first photographer to do a photographic study of the park, and Beara was the first photographic book on Beara. It's not like, oh, you know, feather in my cap, I'm the first, but it's a wonderful help when you're promoting a book, and it's a really nice feeling to feel that you're working on something original. And when you're out in the mornings, it's a lovely feeling to think you're possibly breaking new ground, and that you're going to do something that people will be really excited by. And the reaction to it was fantastic. So, you know, I'm really happy I did.
And, you know, something else I think I was thinking of, and I suppose, like I say, I've known you for a number of years, and I suppose one of the things that I've spotted about you is you have a love-hate relationship with social media. So there was a period of time when you said, that's it, I'm done with social media. I don't want any more to do with it. And now I suppose I see you're back on social media. So like with that in mind and the audience point of view, what's your thoughts? Has social media helped you or hindered you in recent times? Have your thoughts changed on social media? You're on Instagram. Are you on Facebook? What's your thoughts in general? How's social media and you getting on at the moment?
Yeah, I do have a kind of a love-hate relationship with it, to be honest with you. But it's a necessary thing. I mean, I do actually really enjoy lots of it, and I do really enjoy sharing my work. I think that that's quite important, and I don't necessarily do it for anything other than the fact that I get some enjoyment out of sharing it. Now, as a consequence, I I do end up getting, you know, sales and exposure and a bit of promotion about it. I don't have a huge following. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I've only a few thousand followers on Instagram and the same on Facebook. And you know yourself, out of those few thousand, there's only a couple of hundred
Yeah,
that actually probably get to see my stuff.
engage as
I
well.
was a very early adopter to it. I was straight onto Facebook just even before I had a website
Okay.
10 or 11 years ago when it first came out. But immediately I could see the problems with it. A bit like everything in life, I retain a healthy cynicism about it. And I think you have to, because,
Mm.
I mean, let's be honest, about 80% of Instagram is bullshit. You
Yes.
know,
Yeah.
it's absolute nonsense.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the Joe blogs you see with 10,000 followers, it's just mental.
Absolutely.
And I mean, I can see through a lot of that, and I don't look on it and go, oh, I want these. You know, there's certain things that I do that I would rather have a kind of a genuine, engaging, and authentic people that I connect with
Mm-hmm.
than, you know, a quantity. Like everyone else, I get these followers that, you know, these are accounts, and you just know they're fake. I just block them all.
Mm-hmm.
I do go through the follower list for quite a bit of time, and you know, I get messages, and you just know they're bots. You know,
Mm-hmm.
there's not many 19-year-old Brazilian models that really want to chat to me. So I
Only on
just, you know,
Tuesdays, yeah.
yeah. So they're just instantly blocked and reported, because I don't want that skewing, you know, anything. I lament a little bit of the fact that there isn't more kind of meaningful engagement on there. And I can understand, because it's a time thing, and there's lots of people going through lots of things. And I mean, I do it myself. There's photographers that I know and respect and really like, and I love their work, but all I ever do is just give it a like, you
Mm-hmm.
know.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't have the time to go
Mm-hmm.
into an in-depth appraisal of their work at
Mm-hmm.
times.
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate when people take the time to do that. I appreciate when someone says something genuine. And I actually make an effort, as cynical as I am about the whole thing, I make an effort to be genuine and authentic. I kind of try to give a bit of myself there, and I try to, it's not just, you know, look how great I am. I
Mm-hmm.
want to just try and explain a little bit, because that's what's of real interest to me is, you know, I just, you know, I have so much invested in maybe making this image. I want to try and share a little bit of that with people, maybe get across. And all the time, yeah, it's building up maybe a picture of me. It's building up a little bit more of an exposure, and it's slowly, you know, when it comes time to maybe bringing out my next book,
Mm-hmm.
it all makes sense. I have an engaged following
Audience.
that will actually be useful and would be interested in maybe supporting a project like that. And yeah, I mean, that whole concept of, I forget the actual term, but you know, 1,000 followers, that's all you need.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have 1,000 genuine followers who are going to engage with your work, who are going to buy a book, buy a print, you know, book a workshop, whatever, then
Mm-hmm.
that's all you need. And there is this whole philosophy behind that, and I kind of like the idea that I would love if it all went away for maybe a year or something, and see how we all got on. You know,
Yeah.
apart from the photography side of that, you know, social media is just a cesspit of awfulness at most times. I
Agree
think
with you. Yeah.
photography and what we do is one of the safest, nicest places on the internet.
Agreed.
And I think there's this kind of unwritten rule of everyone being nice to each other. There are some days when I look at the everyone being nice to each other as just we're all a bunch of sycophants.
Uh-huh.
But you know, it's better than us being, you know, tearing each other apart. So it's nice. I mean, I remember when I first started, when I went online, and it was nice. It was quite a nice buzz when people were encouraging.
Yes, for sure.
You know, I wouldn't ever be the type of person that would have let that go to my head and start believing my own hype. And in fact, I still probably don't. So when I have some meaningful engagement with people, that's really nice. And I would always encourage it. And maybe it's probably down to how I do it. I don't know. I just wonder. I don't get a whole lot of it. But what I do have is I kind of know the people that I reach. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I use social media and Instagram as a kind of a litmus test for some pictures. Mm-hmm. And I kind of can judge. I can judge whether something actually, because sometimes I actually don't know if an image is good or not. Yeah. It can be one of those things. You can be looking at it for like days and days, and you go, I don't know if this works. And then you can put it up, and if a certain group of people, and sometimes all I'm looking for is maybe the acknowledgement of about a dozen particular followers of mine, and I'll kind of go, okay, yeah,
that will work.
But it's not a hard and fast rule.
Or you could just catch it and throw it up into somewhere where you've got a group of people that will tell you every image is fantastic, even if it's not, and then it ends up becoming something which it actually isn't, and you'd prefer to know something for what it actually is rather than the inverted commas fakeness of the whole social media scene in that point of view. And I think one thing I find quite a lot about Instagram is it's the images that are oversaturated, that are super saturated, that are beyond realism are the ones that actually work really, really well on Instagram. But an actual proper image that's been taken correctly, which has subtle colours for what they actually were, you didn't bring the slider for saturation or vibrance up to 11 or 12. They're the ones that don't do well on Instagram. And then you might go, oh, hang on, if I'm only shooting for the gram here, oh, okay, that's not a good image. But in fact, it's actually a far better image than the image that you super saturated and that got all the likes on Instagram. And I think that's probably a balance that a lot of people don't get early on in their photography. And then they start editing for Instagram, and it affects how they edit their images going forward, which actually isn't a good trend to go down the route.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, I count myself very fortunate that my formative years in photography were before the internet even existed. So I kind of developed a style, and I began developing a style. I'm still developing. I don't even know what that means sometimes, developing a style, but I'm progressing as a photographer, and I have an idea of what I want to do. I find it hard sometimes when you're exposed to so many images to isolate yourself from that and to insulate yourself from it and not let it unduly affect you in a way that it shouldn't, because there's nothing worse. And I don't know if it happens to many people, but it happens to me on a couple of occasions when you're just about to click the shutter and you realize you're taking someone else's picture. And I kind of, it's like, a cold shudder of someone walking over your grave feeling. Yeah. I just feel, I kind of, and that actually kind of depresses me a little bit. And I think you were alluding to before when I used to do that. I've done it a couple of times, just completely shut down all my social media accounts. And I did it at a time when I was doing Beara, because I felt I was at a time when I knew creatively I was really challenged, and I was working in a particular area, and there was some images that I just had to go out and see this place anew. And there were a couple of images that I had seen of it, and I just didn't want to take that picture. So I, just shut myself off from everything for a couple of months. And it's wonderful to do that. I think I have, I've seen photographers and I've seen people say, oh, I don't look at other photographers' images, I just do my own stuff. I don't believe that for a second. And it's hard. It's really hard not to suddenly be influenced by other people's work. I probably struggled with it earlier on. I think I have quite a good handle on it now, and I have a very good idea, and I'm far more confident as a photographer of the images I want to make. And I've learned that when I am exposed to something, I try not to just, I don't endlessly scroll through people's work all the time or anything, but there are a couple of photographers I follow. I try and follow photographers and look at work that is going to be, a million miles away from what I do anyway. Guys who photograph in the desert in Arizona or something like that. But I feel I'd get nothing from following photographers that, shoot what I do and
same places, same spots. Yeah.
But it has its pitfalls, but it also has its benefits, and certainly the explosion of photographers, purely, I suppose, from Instagram has been incredible. I mean, it's great. It's great, really. I mean, what better thing to do than to go out and photograph the landscape and to be passionate about it. And I think in the past I've talked about this and in interviews and stuff, and I've probably come across as a bit curmudgeonly and resentful of it. I'm not really. It is genuinely great. It's just not for me, and I view it in a very different way, and I would like if it was a little bit different. The sociability side of it and everything, guys meeting up together and 3 or 4 of them going up doing landscape photography. Personally, I don't get it because I work by myself and I need to work by myself because it's a personal thing. But it's great that photography has given people that, and friendships and everything has formed. There's probably been marriages, for sure, out of landscape photography, and Instagram and whatever. So it's good. Hopefully it'll only get better and things will improve. I mean, I think the people who dedicate themselves and give a bit of their time and a bit of their life to it, just the people who are still running around lavender fields with their iPhones, is just probably ruining it for everyone, I think,
Well, you know what, it's like you see the one type of photograph that somebody gets, and then it's like, okay, I want to go do that, and somebody goes and plonks their tripod or their feet in exactly the same spot, takes exactly the same photograph, and you end up with nothing unique, nothing personal, and it's just something that I saw that work on social media, I'm going to do exactly the same. Yeah, okay, let's see if I can do the same. And as you mentioned, like with a phone, like you can point a phone, you can take a photograph, and something I've noticed over many, many years on different groups on Facebook and such like that, not photography groups, but, just kind of general, like Ireland groups and whatever it may be. And somebody all of a sudden, every so often, they'll drop a post and go, can somebody please post a photograph that's not been processed? And you're looking going, hang on a second, every photograph has been processed. Even the photograph you take with your phone has been processed.
Exactly, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, like, people kind of they look at the colors and the explosion of colors, because colors are an emotional connection. The brighter the color, the more attracted you are to it. But that's fine. But if you're a photographer, the brighter the color for me, the more repulsed I am from it. And I mean, you often see of people that you say about a sunset. If you go to take a sunset and it's a bright bright crimson red sunrise or sunset, you'll invariably end up bringing the saturation down when you're processing the image, because you kind of go, oh, hang on, it looks a bit too much, or whatever it may have been. But there's still people out there that would push that little bit further because it's color. And the color is something I think that attracts people to Instagram, for number one. But exactly as you say, it's a case of where is the uniqueness? Where is there something that somebody can grow from it and find their own path, find their own vision, find their own style? And if you're constantly copying somebody else, then, I don't think it can be any way beneficial. But also at the same point, it can be good to learn. And if you've got people, like you say, for example, that you're looking, you might put up a post and say, okay, if a certain group of 12 people comment or like in it, I know I'm onto a good thing. But on the flip side to that, you may have an image that you think is excellent, and it may not get the love and the attention that you were expected. And that's where I think social media can be detrimental to somebody's experience, somebody's journey, somebody's abilities, because it can be so much so you're feeding on that little heart appearing, or you're feeding on those likes, and it's not really indicative of photography, because photography has been around a lot longer than social media. That's the thing I think people forget about, is that social media is not photography, and photography is not social media. And for me, I'm similar to your thought process, to be honest with you, because my world of social media is only photography. I've got friends of mine and they see all these other people's lives. I don't even look at that. I don't even have that. I've all that blocked from any. All ever appears on my feed is photographs. And I see photographs from the select people that I want to see photographs of. And that's where I can say, okay, you know what? I can help people. I'm not saying I'm a fantastic photographer in any way, shape or form, but I can help people because I might be longer in my journey than they are. Or they can help me because they might know something that I've wanted to learn. Like, for example, Astro or whatever it may have been. And I go, okay, geez, I want to know how to do that. So it has its benefits, but as you say, it also has its pitfalls. And I think it's something, it's a topic I've spoken about a number of times on the podcast, and I could go on about it, Norman, for a long time, So look, what I'll do here, is I'll take one final break, right? And I've 3 questions that I ask every guest, and I'm going to come back after the break and I'll ask you exactly the same 3 questions. So hope you're ready for them, because they're not that easy, but they're not that hard as well. So we'll be right back after this. If you're enjoying this episode of the podcast, why not jump over to iTunes or Spotify
and listen to the back catalogue that we have of some great episodes where we talk about photography, gear, and some excellent guests along the way. Thanks very much for listening and for watching. We'll see you on the next one.
And you're very welcome back to the final part of the Irish Photography Podcast. So, Norm, we have a regular segment, like I alluded to before the break. You know, I've got 3 questions that I ask every single guest. And the first question I'm going to ask you, and that is a funny photography story. So, what's yours? Have you many?
Well, as a landscape photographer, I work on my own.
On your own,
all
yeah.
the time. So what might be funny to me, there's not much opportunities for humor really, as such when you're out all day on your own.
Yeah.
That's a tricky one. I mean, I've done pretty stupid things. You know, I've driven from Kenmare to Clonakilty at 5 a.m. for a shoot and left my camera bag at home. You know, I've done silly little things like that. Probably, I suppose if I was in a pub sitting down telling photography stories, they'd generally be centered around kind of the commercial world or weddings. There's the particular venue that I worked in. The owner of that venue loves to tell this story to everyone. Now he tells all brides about it, but I had taken a bride and groom off to a particular location on the grounds of the venue, and they used to very kindly give me their golf cart, their golf buggy, to ferry the bride and groom around. And I used to tear around the place in this, and I knew exactly what I was doing. Every week was the same thing. Great fun. And we were going up this kind of little hill, and next minute the bride started screaming. Stopped the thing, stuff. So I turned around, and I didn't want to turn around because I thought I was going to see blood or her legs stuck in the thing or something. But probably even worse was her dress had got wrapped around the back axle of the car. So I didn't know what to do. I just got out and I just unwound it, and I kind of handed her this big lump of greasy rags into her lap. I was just, I didn't really know what to say. I just kept saying sorry. But anyway, there was nothing for it. But amazingly, the dress was a kind of a bizarre thing. It had these 3 layers, or even more than 3 layers, but it was a layered dress.
Okay.
And it was the top big frilly layer that it had got. And there was nothing for it. But I just said, let's just rip it off. So we just ripped off the top layer and carried on with the shoot, and there was a little bit of a mark somewhere else, but I said we'll hide that, so it was fine. Got back to the venue, and of course the story went around very quickly, and I did my best to do the rest of the day without any major cock-ups, and before we were announcing the bride and groom in, the bride and groom were sitting outside the venue having a bit of a chat, reliving the incident. And I said, would you like a drink? And I went up to the bar to get them a drink, and I got them 2 glasses of champagne. I was walking down to them. Then I proceeded to spill one of the glasses of champagne right into her lap. And we just looked at each other and laughed. And thank God it was champagne and not red wine.
Not red wine, yeah.
And at this stage, I couldn't believe what I was doing. So I said, you know what, I'm actually going to go because I just don't want to do anything more. And I hung around for a bit, did some speeches and so on. I wasn't staying for the late part of the wedding. And as I was saying my goodbyes, I went up and said goodbye. We were all laughing again because it was just a constant thing of laughing, saying, I can't believe this actually happened. I mean, they were brilliant.
Comedy
they were
errors,
brilliant.
yeah.
They saw the funny side of it, and there was no real damage done. We got the pictures done. I went back out to my car and was getting in the car, just about to drive away, and I realised there was something in my pocket, and I realised it was her lipstick that she had handed me at some stage, the bride's lipstick. So I went back in to give her the lipstick, and I went over to the table, and she's sitting down having after dinner drinks, whatever, chatting to someone, and she's caught my eye, and I went to hand her this thing, and she wasn't really looking at what I was doing, and so she grabbed it, and the top came off, and then the lipstick flew at her and hit her dress. And at that stage, I did hold up my hands and just say, right, that's it.
I'm out of here.
Yeah, I couldn't believe it. Three times. Anyway, they come down to Kenmare every year. They walk into the gallery and they just go, it's us, you know. We have a great laugh. But the owner of the venue just, I worked with him for another 2 years. and he had every couple primed with this story about listen to this, what this guy did. So that was a bit of fun. But out in the landscape, apart from doing silly things myself, which sometimes aren't that funny because they're quite annoying, taking your camera out with no batteries in it or no
Or
power.
forgetting your entire camera bag if you're on the way.
The camera bag one was hilarious because I had just bought a new car, and I was more excited about the new car than anything else. So I thought I'm going to take it on a test run. Got up at, I think, about 4 a.m, got down to Clonakilty, and it was all go. And I opened the boot, and I just couldn't understand what was wrong with this picture. I just couldn't process that the camera bag wasn't there. I ended up driving home, and I was so stubborn and determined. I ended up driving back to Kenmare, which is about 2 hours, getting the camera bag and getting straight back in the car and going back down and staying in Inchydoney for the night to get up in the morning to do it. I was just determined, and I'd be like that sometimes.
Be bullish when I'm going to do
something stupid. Yeah. But so.
That was interesting. They do say that things come in threes. So you did have 3 incidences, I suppose, with the bride, and then obviously like forgetting the camera bag, I suppose, is unforgivable, to be honest. But let me ask you the question, because I do ask the similar question is what's in your camera bag at the moment. So what gear do you shoot with?
Since I switched to digital, I've photographed with Canon cameras for the last, say, 10 years. Currently, my main camera is an EOS R5.
Okay.
I wouldn't be the most techie orientated person. I'm not a real gearhead as such, but I have to say I absolutely love this camera.
Is it phenomenal?
I wouldn't be the one to judge it in terms of files and quality. In terms of, I love what it's given me so far, so I've nothing to compare it to in terms of comparing it to a Nikon or a Sony. I had a Sony, I had an A7R II, and that was an amazing camera.
But 8 batteries.
Yes, so that was my big problem with that camera.
Yeah.
It absolutely sucked, and I couldn't use it. So I sold it, after a few months. But this new camera, I love the ergonomics of it. I love that articulated screen because, I used to shoot a medium format film with a view camera for 15, 16 years. And one of the things that I loved doing was shooting low down and looking down into the camera. So now I kind of do that a little bit more with this. My eyesight is also getting, ridiculously stupid at this age stage of my life. And suddenly I need glasses.
Yeah.
But all of a sudden you have all these focusing aids with this camera, which I didn't have on my 5DSR. And just that simple those 2 little triangles that come and meet
they're very
and
nice.
go green when you're in focus is just an absolute godsend for me. And it makes working with the camera, and all I want out of a camera is for it to be not there, basically. I don't want to have to think about anything. I have a very rudimentary setup in terms of how I photograph. I don't do any of the crazy stuff. I don't do focus stacking. I wouldn't know how to. I don't bracket. I don't do any of that stuff, right? I'm pretty, I photograph in the conditions that I find favorable and that I think I can work in. Other than that, I don't really work. So I want a camera that is quite intuitive. And, I was worried about changing from my last one because, with the 5DSR, which was pretty much the same as the 5D Mark III and the 5D Mark II, which is what I've used, you could use it in the dark with your eyes closed. I was so used to it. The way Canon do it, they don't change a whole lot.
You can do that with the R5, exactly the same. Yeah.
So I have that camera. I have a selection of tilt and shift lenses, a 24mm, which is my main lens, but I'm using the 50mm a lot more nowadays.
And have you got
are
they EF lenses or RF lenses? They're the EF lenses, yeah?
Yeah, so they're the EF manual focus lenses, although amazingly Canon are supposed to be bringing out new versions of these tilt and shift lenses
in the RF,
for the RF, and apparently they're going to be autofocus. Now, I don't actually use autofocus. I even my autofocus lenses, I actually manually focus. It's just a habit. It's just how I work. So I would have those 3 tilt and shifts. I have that lovely 24-70 RF lens, and I just got the 70-200.
RF?
Yes.
Oh, that's beautiful. Beautiful.
Yeah, an amazing
beautiful
lens.
Yeah.
With those two lenses are incredible because I have been hand holding, and I never hand hold, but I've been hand holding practically in the dark and photographing with these and getting still. So it's opened up a whole new possibility of images that I could actually make and want to make, and that I'd kind of thought about, but never really could do with the camera fixed to a tripod. So it's really good. I have a selection of other lenses that I've amassed over the years, but that would be my main, and I still have the 5DSR as a backup. I recently got rid of the 1DX because I'm not doing weddings and commercials or anything anymore.
What tripod do you use?
Yeah, I've a bit of a tripod fetish, so I have a number of tripods. They're mainly all Gitsos, even though I fell out of love with Gitsos a few years ago, and two of my Gitsos fell apart, and in some respects they are overpriced.
Yes, I agree.
The recent ones, they sorted a lot of the stuff they were doing out. I kind of switched to Manfrottos and stuff, and they were even worse because they're made in the cheap end of the Gitso factory. I think. Yeah. So the latest, the more recent Gitso tripods have been incredible. I mean, I have a Mountaineer one, and I have it a couple of years now. I really put it through its paces. The heads are rubbish. I don't like the Gitso heads.
I don't like mine either. Yeah, and I want to use it, but it's not as good as I think it should be.
I recently bought a really small little, I don't know what the technical term is. It's a leveling head, but it's from Leo Photo.
Yes.
So I was going to buy an Arca Swiss version of it because another photographer I know had recommended it, and I was about to press the button on this head, which was about £800 sterling. And I don't know why I'd never got one before, and I knew this is what I actually needed. But then I somehow came across this Leo Photo one, which is obviously a Chinese brand that basically knocks off anything that Arca Swiss do.
Exactly.
But the quality is incredible. And I was really, it was only €200, so I said it was worth the gamble. It has been an absolute joy to use. So that's been an absolute revelation. Using this head in a totally different way.
How about filters? Have you filters?
Yeah, I try and keep that pretty basic. I did go down the whole road of trying other brands a couple of years ago. I tried Nisi and I tried a couple of others because basically all I use is an ND grad, and I know you can bracket, and I know I probably don't need to use a filter, and you can do it all in post and everything. I still like to compose, and I still like to see an image out there. I find it quite distracting if I'm going to take a picture with a burnt out sky thinking I'm going to bring that back
Fix
in
it later.
I can't do that. I just have it hardwired in me that no, that's gone. So I use grads because I treat my gear so badly. I was going through so many of them that I was, stopped buying, glass ones because I was breaking them, and I just went back to Lee filters once again.
The resin.
And I'll get 2 or 3 months out of one before it's scratched to hell, which is crazy. So I have a block of them. I don't know what to do with them.
Make an art design or something out of them. Put them together. Be creative and
so and I keep that fairly simple. I mean, I have a polarizer, but I very rarely use it. If I'm in woodland in the autumn, that's about it. But I know people live and die by a polarizer, but I can't stand what it does to skies and stuff. I try and keep it simple. Keep it simple, cable release, and that's it.
Kind of a meat and potatoes type of guy, just keep it simple and just job done.
I know gear matters, and I am very privileged and fortunate that, I work. This is my living, so I buy all the nice toys that I think are going to allow me to create better pictures and whatever, and continue working. But it's not the be all and end all of everything. I've stuck with Canon over the years because that's just what I knew. My very, very first camera was a Canon, but other than that, so yeah, I mean, I keep it simple purely because that's what suits me. I mean, I'm straying away from that a little bit. I'm doing a little side project which involves working at night with lights. That has me thinking more technically. That's just more of a means to an end, and rather enjoying the fact that I think I'm quite clever, doing all this stuff. It's still about the image at the end of the day, really.
Absolutely. And I suppose the third and final question I have for you there is we've a regular segment called a VSP. It's a very solid product. It's something photography related that you won't leave home without. And if you could put your name to it, you would put your name to it. So what's your VSP?
My boots.
Okay.
Yeah, my Zambalan boots.
Okay.
I'm on my fourth pair now, I think.
Okay.
All my outdoor gear, I spend more on outdoor gear than I do on photography gear. It's ridiculous, and I always think I need more, and I don't. It's just I have to stop. You know, I've actually just got a delivery of a new jacket today, and I have about 4 jackets, but this was just seemed to be the best jacket.
It's shiny.
Yeah. So, but there is a logic to my thinking. Whatever I have on me that allows me to spend an extra 4 or 5 hours out in the landscape, comfortable, dry, and safe, then it's money well spent. I quite confidently wade off into bogs or stand in rivers or whatever in my boots, knowing that I'm not going to get wet. And I'm not the type of photographer that, you know, I'll suffer an inconvenience lightly. Like if I get wet or cold, I'm getting annoyed, and I'm therefore not taking.
Yeah, you're done basically.
Concentrating on you know, if I get my feet wet, it just annoys me.
Yeah.
So I don't want to be that. And for years, I've met people out, you know, dressed in jeans and woolly jumpers in the landscape, kind of thinking, what are you doing? And I made a decision. Well, I suppose the turning point for me was I went to Antarctica in 2008, and we got a list of gear that there wasn't an option. We had to have this, and if we didn't have this, we weren't getting on the plane. And all of a sudden, I was going in and I was spending a fortune on this stuff, and I was like, do I really need all this? You know, suddenly I had all this gear and the Gore-Tex everything and base layers and, you know, 2 different types of boots and all this, gloves, and it was the best thing ever. And suddenly I'm, you know, staying out, you know, in South Georgia for, you know, hours and hours, snug as a bug and perfectly safe and everything. And I thought, oh yeah, okay, that's what it's about, is having good gear. But my boots are, it's ridiculous. My wife thinks I'm just ridiculous. I come home and I wash them and wax them more than, you know, so
but it's
I do
important.
that before I say hello to the kids.
But it is.
Important. Oh, it's massively important, and it's good. So so that would be my my thing. Everyone should get themselves a really, really good pair of boots.
Okay. Yeah, you have to give me the details there, and I can try and find them and put up a link into the group so that people can see the type of boots that they are. Because I fully agree with you. You know, they say in the army and stuff like that, always look after your feet, because if your feet get wet or anything like that, it can be detrimental. But even as you say, if your feet are wet and it's cold, you're uncomfortable. You're not enjoying it. As you say, your mind isn't engaged in what it should be, and all you're thinking about now is that my feet are cold or whatever it may have been. Like the one thing I find that I don't like about my boots anyway is grip. Because like I could go onto rocks. I do a lot of seascape, so I go onto rocks and I'll be slipping. Whereas I've got other boots, like, you know, like grip is really, really important. And like exactly the same as you say then as well. You want to be able to walk across an area and go to an area that you can get into, compose that photograph. And you don't want to have to compromise.
Yeah.
You know,
but never ever trust the grip on anything.
No, I know.
I mean that's just the golden rule. Is like if you think your boots are, you know, that's super good that they're going to protect you over slippy rocks, then you'll find out the hard way. So I always just try and err on the side of caution.
Yeah.
Even though they probably will hold you, and you know the guys in the shops will tell you, oh, this extra anti-slip sole, this and that. It's nonsense. You know, if it's a slippy rock, it's a slippy rock.
It is. So, listen, final question. I've really, really enjoyed everything, I suppose, so far. So, like, what's next now for you? You know, we're like in the start of 2021. What's next for 2021 for Norm?
The main thing really is trying to concentrate on when we might be able to open the gallery again out of lockdown. I'm not massively concerned about it. I think it will happen, and we're kind of resigned to the fact now that it probably won't be until mid or late May. We have the kind of reassurance of what we went through last year to kind of think, oh, you know, well, okay, it's another year where, you know, we are going to lose money, but we're going to keep going. So that's kind of sneaking in there. But really, my main preoccupation is to finish my next book project.
Okay.
Which is called Kingdom. Which is a book on the Kingdom of Kerry. This is my adopted county that I live in here. And that was supposed to be out last Christmas. but obviously it couldn't be. And I get an extra year to do it. But it's an extra funny year. It's not really a full year at all because we can't really travel. I can't do half the stuff I want to do.
Yeah.
So we were actually just working today and yesterday on cover concepts, and that was really exciting because I have a really great idea for the cover. That's going to be really nice. I really love the editing and design stage of the book. I'm really kind of into that, and I work with a really great local designer here, who's a good friend of mine. So that's really good. So I have quite a bit of work done, but I have a lot to do. And the way the books work is I will photograph an awful lot, and very few of them will actually end up getting in the book. But that's just the nature of the game. I'm probably committed to hopefully photographing until next August.
Okay.
And try and get everything I want to get done for it, and have it out for, I suppose, mid-autumn, late autumn in time for Christmas. From then on, we hope to do lots of pretty cool stuff. I hope to have some exhibitions with it. There's a tentative plans to bring it to America for an exhibition over there.
Fantastic.
There's a great expat community over there, something that I didn't really exploit with Bera. But I think the Kerry connection is a bit wider reach.
Yeah, it's huge.
And it's a bit more legible. It's a bit more understandable. It's a good thing to back. So I'm really looking forward to that. Yeah, just keep going, I suppose.
Well, you know what? I hope that 2021 will be good for you. I think as you say, you've got a lot that's lined up. I hope it all comes out. It sounds interesting about the book, and even like we've discussed a number of things here this evening, Norman. I think it's been fascinating for you to kind of give the insight into where you've come from, what makes you tick, and now as well where you're going. So, look, thank you very, very, very much for coming on. It's been a pleasure. I've really, really enjoyed the conversation with you. I'm looking forward now to seeing the finished book when it comes out at the end of 2021. And where can people find more information on you? What details can people find more information on Norman McCloskey?
Okay, well, first and foremost, when we are able to move around, people can call into the gallery. I am actually kind of there less and less. I tend to be at the workshop here where I'm talking to you from at the moment.
Sure.
When we're busy. But it's great to meet people. I'm always happy to chat. Photographers are kind of funny. Some, quite a lot come in and they can be quite sheepish or wouldn't necessarily say hello and have a look around. What they don't realize is we can spot you a mile away. So, I always find it quite funny. And even my wife has got really good at spotting photographers. They tend to look at work very differently. So, but I'd always encourage people to come in and say hello, and let me know what you're up to. And I'm always kind of happy to chat. It's best doing that in person. But failing that, on the dreaded social media, I am on Instagram. I think it's Norman McCloskey. So head over there and give me and don't just like or follow, but maybe, I don't know,
say hello.
Maybe tell me that you heard this and let me know where you're coming from.
Yeah.
Which is always nice. Facebook, I don't know. I've half given up on Facebook now. Their whole approach to everything is just certainly for me, and the way they approach me and my account and the algorithm is just all about, unless I pay for something, then no one's seeing it. So, and I kind of like the brevity of Instagram as well, a little bit. Although the square format, even though I shoot mainly squares, it can be a bit limiting. And that's really it. I have a website for anyone who actually wants to invest in some high quality art. That's normanmccloskey.com. I do kind of occasionally blog on there. I'm very sporadic at it. And that's actually one of the what's next as well, is a big revamp of the website.
Fantastic.
Which is a long term project, but hopefully we're going to get it done in the next few months, just in time for the new season.
Fantastic.
But as I said, in person is always good. So if you're in Kenmare, do call in and say hello.
Yeah, fantastic. So look, like I said a moment ago, I really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you very, very much for coming on. And hopefully when things come back to a bit of normality, I'll go back to my usual trick, is anytime I go to Kenmare, I always call in and say hi to you. So until I can see you again in person, thank you very much once again. It was great. And from me in Cork to you down in the Kingdom, slán go fóill.
Cheers. Thanks, Darren. All the best.
Cheers, man.
Hey guys, if you dig what you're hearing, why don't you jump over to iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Give us a 5-star rating and don't forget to share with your friends. With all that done, we'll see you next week, and remember, keep shooting.